my name's Rachel Lowe, and I'm the founder of Loved and Enough, which is a positive community to help people to eat more vegan food. I started that because I've been vegetarian for 30 years and vegan for 10 years, and I wanted to share with people my experience of making really great vegan food at home, both for myself and for the family, to just help people understand that it can be really easy, tasty and fun.
So why did you decide to become a vegan?
I became vegan 10 years ago, after I made the connection between being vegetarian and the use of animals that was required in order to produce the dairy products and the eggs. And once I realised that wasn't as cruelty-free as I had thought it was previously, I could no longer feel comfortable in participating in that industry. I became vegetarian 30 years ago because I'd made the connection between the animals and the meat, which to me was a much more obvious connection. So even then as a child, that was something that I felt very strongly about. So it was curious that it took me another 20 years to realise exactly then what went into the dairy and egg industry, as well as other industries like leather production, etc. I'd always thought that they were byproducts of the meat industry as opposed to something that directly affects the animals.
Now, I know there is a difference between being a vegan and a vegetarian. Some people do get this confused. What is the actual difference?
So the main difference between them is dairy and eggs, but also it's the lifestyle around products such as leather and silk, for example. So a vegan doesn't have any products that either require animals in the production or uses them as part of the process, whereas a vegetarian will exclude chicken, fish and meat, but they will consume dairy and eggs, and it will be personal choice as to whether they would have other products. That's not part of the technical definition of vegetarian.
So how long has veganism been around?
It's been around forever. It's there's lots of evidence to suggest it goes back thousands of years. However, in terms of from a technical perspective, the guy called Donald Walsh captured the term vegan in 1944. So he was the first person to coin the phrase vegan, and he did that to say that it was really the beginning and end of vegetarianism, which is how he made the name. And from then there was a specific kind of definition that people could understand and share as a kind of common understanding. There are various religions around the world that have predominantly vegan diets too.
Can you tell me about Veganuary?
So Veganuary is an international initiative. They're a charity-based organisation, and they challenge people to try eating vegan food for the month of January, hopefully beyond. But the idea is that they put out a lot of support to people through the month of January to be able to help people to understand just how easy it is to be able to eat vegan food. And they have a huge participation. They've got about 150,000 people that are doing it this year, which is incredible. And it's grown massively over the last few years to help people understand what it's all about.
Eating out as maybe a vegetarian or even a vegan. I remember going on holiday with a friend who's a vegan, and I remember looking at her plate, and she just literally had a huge plate of fruit and vegetables. But how many restaurants actually cater now for vegans, and how accommodating are they?
Yeah, nowadays it's never been better than it is today in terms of the offer that restaurants have for vegans and for vegetarians. Vegetarian's been catered for much more widely for a long time, and vegans is much more recent in the last few years, particularly. The offerings increased exponentially. So almost all high street chains will have vegan options that are clearly identified on the menu before you even ask. And if they don't, if you do ask, they're almost always incredibly helpful to provide something that's very tasty. Interestingly, as an example, in the last year or so, all the major pizza chains have started stocking vegan cheese, and they have dedicated vegan pizzas that you can that you can get, and many places have also started opening dedicated veggie restaurants. There's a Italian restaurant that's actually opened a specific vegetarian place in Covent Garden, and Pret, for example, have a veggie Pret in London, which is doing extraordinarily well. It's never been a better time to get vegan food.
Vegan cheese.
Yes.
That sounds interesting. What is that made from?
Well, you can get it made from different things. You can get soya-based vegan cheeses, and you can get coconut-based vegan cheeses.
Coconut cheese.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. The soy cheese has been around a lot longer, and coconut cheese is a more recent thing. Personally, I prefer the coconut cheeses, which they sell in the big supermarkets, and it's just fantastic. It's really surprising. The vegan cheese game has been upped again amazingly in the last year or two, in the taste and variety. In fact, I had friends yesterday who tried out a complete vegan cheese board that I'd put together, and they're meat eaters and cheese lovers, and they were all genuinely surprised at how good it was, because it's one of those things that people often say they would really miss if they didn't have dairy. So to realise that they can still eat a blue cheese or a cheddar or a smoked cheese or a jalapeno cheese or a peppercorn soft cheese, it's really surprising to people just what variety is out there and how good it tastes now.
What about children who need different types of food for their development, and where can they get their nutrition from if they're not eating meat or drinking milk?
Yeah. So children need a balanced diet, regardless of whether that's a vegan diet or a meat-eating diet. I would argue that if you've got responsible parents who are giving their children a vegan diet, they possibly are paying more attention to all of the dietary needs, for that child. Certainly myself as a parent, I spend a lot of time making sure that all of the nutritional needs of my child are met. Equally, you could have a meat-eating child that eats nugget and chips or sausage and chips all the time, who wouldn't be getting all of the vitamins and minerals they need from those food sources, because obviously there are a lot of good stuff in vegetables and fruits and nuts. To have that, it's good practice for everyone to have a vitamin supplement anyway, and the NHS recommends that all children over the age of 6 months should have a vitamin D supplement because of the lack of sunlight in this country. So why not make it a multivitamin, and just make sure that there's a good baseline in there for all children, but for everyone too.
I think as well, we were talking earlier about children's menus, and a lot of these contain everything comes with chips. Now, surely if we're trying to get our children to be healthier and introducing vegetables, surely the government as well as restaurants should be doing something about this.
I think the government are in different areas. We've just got the sugar tax that's been implemented on a broader health theme, and it is already and will continue to have a massive impact on the food industries in terms of the food that they're providing to children, and the way that food is advertised, etc. I think the key thing really is that parents need a bit of help and support in understanding what the nutritional needs of their children are and how they can meet it in a variety of ways. And I know myself as a parent, it's really difficult to convince a little one to eat different foods and to try different fruits and vegetables. And there's lots of ways that you can do that in terms of making interesting things that they maybe they help you make, making different types of muffins where you hide some courgette in it or some beetroot in it, for example. But really, it's just about trying to offer a variety of foods to see what you can get the children engaged in eating. But I think the government are doing a lot of programs around that to try and help parents with that support. But the more access that any parents have to help them to be able to do it, and the more interest they take themselves in food, the better for them and for their children.
A lot of prescription drugs are tested on animals. How does a vegan work around this?
So the Vegan Society has a section on information on this, and they would say that where a drug is prescribed and therefore it is required for the benefit of the individual, that they should then consider taking it because that's what they need in order to ensure their health. There are some vegans who wouldn't do that. They would not take required medicine because they feel strongly about the potential for the product having been tested on animals. But really it comes down to personal choice about what someone is happy with. We don't live in a vegan world. Everything that or most things that we use and consume on a daily basis, the roads we drive on, the cars we drive, the mobile phones we use, the money we handle, often contains either an animal product or has used animals in the processing somewhere or has done in the past. So when it comes down to something like a prescription drug that somebody requires for their health, many vegans consider that in a different category to something that they choose to have as part of a lifestyle or enjoyment product. From a personal perspective, there are things that you can do with a drug. For example, use a vegetable capsule as opposed to a gelatin capsule, so that you can minimise the consumption of any product wherever possible.
And how about travel? Does that present problems? Because some countries, they're not as open to veganism as, say, we are here in the UK.
That's true, but there's also a lot of countries that are more open to veganism than we are. So it depends. It depends where you travel to. Germany, for example, which to many people may seem like quite a meaty orientated country, has got some amazing vegan options. I went last year and I was genuinely surprised at the variety and the choice that was offered, just on a standard basis in the hotel breakfast, for example. And some countries have Buddhism, for example, as a kind of significant culture, and a lot of the food that then is available through that is vegan naturally. Thailand, for example, they use a lot of coconut milk rather than dairy, so you can get accidentally vegan dishes very easily. The challenge really with travelling is that when there's a language barrier, and it makes it difficult sometimes to be sure about all of the products that are contained within the food, particularly when you're eating out or you're eating something that's already been prepared. But with a few simple questions, it's pretty easy to navigate, and I think ultimately just doing your best wherever you can, unless there's an allergy issue, is really all that you can do.
We take children to the farm and we show them animals such as chicken and sheep and pigs. And then we're creating food with the meat from these animals. Do you think children make the connection?
I don't think a lot of children would make the connection. I also think that a lot of adults don't make the connection between the animals and the meat. And that's not to say that intellectually people don't understand that the animals turn into the meat. I'm sure that people do. But in our hearts, it's a very different thing to actually experience that and to perhaps have witnessed the process of an animal becoming dinner. And I don't think when children look at an animal, they're taught that, or they're shown that, to say, this is what ends up on our plate. And I'm not saying that they should be at that young age. Again, I think that's a choice for the parents about how they choose to raise their children. Some parents would make sure their children are very aware of it, and then, the children obviously would react to that. But also, even the list that you mentioned there, some of those things like chicken, it is called chicken when people eat it, but you don't eat sheep, you don't eat pig, you eat sausages, you eat, lamb is lamb, but you don't eat, you call it mutton if it's a sheep, isn't it? But you eat sausages, or you eat burgers, or you eat
bacon.
Or pancetta. Sometimes people don't even know what animal their product has come from. So often it's kind of disguised in terms of that what we actually get as a final product versus what the animal was originally.
Okay, I have a scenario for you. You're having a dinner party. What would you serve? And especially for those who are meat eaters and say they are, right, I'm not vegetarian, I'm never going to be vegetarian. How would you make this appealing to them?
That's a great question. I've got quite a lot of experience on this because most people that I know, most of my friends and family eat meat rather than be vegan, certainly, although there are some vegetarians in there. I try to make a dinner party meal as interesting as possible, but also keeping it sort of fairly simple. But to give you some ideas of the kind of things I've recently served, starters, I'm really into making sweet chili cauliflower buffalo wings at the moment. They are really great. They're essentially florets of you could use broccoli or cauliflower, but I use cauliflower, which you put into a batter, which is essentially water and flour. And then once you've fried it off, you then marinate it in sweet chili sauce, and that's really surprisingly awesome. Or I might go for something a little bit more traditional, like a soup, and make something like a broccoli soup or a leek and potato soup, which people are often very familiar with, depending on the whole menu. Main course, I might make a roast dinner. So I would make, all the usual veggies. I just make sure that I would use a vegetable oil rather than any butter in preparing them. Roast potatoes, thankfully, are vegan as long as you cook them in vegetable fat or some olive oil or something. And I might do that with something like a vegan toad in the hole with vegan sausages, but also make a really nice deep Yorkshire pudding. And obviously you'd have the onion gravy and to go with it. Or I might do something like a spaghetti bolognese, but I would use lentils and soy mince as an alternative, which again is very filling and kind of very familiar foods to people, and that's a great one for kids as well if there's any kids coming for dinner. And desserts, like yesterday I made a vegan Black Forest gateau cake, which went down incredibly well, using a sort of a cherry jam within it, but also essentially a chocolate sponge. Yes, you can make sponges without using eggs and dairy, and serve that maybe with a banana ice cream, homemade banana ice cream.
Yummy.
Or if it was an adult's dinner party, something I made the other day that was divine was a gin and chocolate orange pudding, like a mousse. And that went down very well, but it does have a lot of chocolate in it. And then I'd top it off with a vegan cheese board, because like I say, there's so many great alternatives for cheese now. I'd want to show that off to my friends. And things like cream crackers and digestives often are vegan. You just need to check the specific brands, but often the cheaper ones tend to use vegetable oil rather than any sort of butter. So
now some people might say, how on earth do you make Yorkshire puddings or even a cake without eggs?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying that it's healthy. So I think that's one of the key things about the cake particularly, because there are lots of different ways of doing it. There's lots of different recipes, but the one that I made yesterday, for example, used quite a lot of oil and sugar and baking powder and self-raising flour, but the secret ingredient to it is something called aquafaba. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Come across that.
Aquafaba is really interesting. You could call it chickpea juice,
right,
which doesn't sound quite as fancy, but it's essentially the water which needs to be an unsalted water that you get from a can of chickpeas. It could be any legume, but chickpeas is a good one. And basically, a tablespoon of that is almost a direct replacement for one egg. In fact, it's so much like egg that if you whip it with sugar and a little bit of cream of tartar, it actually makes vegan meringues that are almost identical to the big giant meringues that you can get. They're, again, like with sugar in there. It's really surprising what that can make, but essentially it whips up really well. So when you put it in a cake, it helps it to rise with the combination of the baking powder and the self-raising flour, and the same with Yorkshire puddings. You can use alternatives in terms of egg replacers to be able to get them to rise equally as well as they would be if you used eggs. Really interesting, and also helpful for people who might have an egg allergy, or who follow an eggless diet for whatever reason, regardless of whether they're vegan.
And you have a website.
My website's lovedandenough.com, and it's a positive community for people who just want to eat more vegan food or more plant-based food. It's a very positive community, so we only talk about the food and different recipe ideas. You don't have to be vegan to participate. It's more the merrier. My belief is that it's a lot easier for many people who eat meat to perhaps be able to eat more vegan food rather than convert fully to the vegan lifestyle, and my website is the place where people can come and do that and get different ideas and inspiration and find recipes and engage with other people who are doing the same, to be able to get some support and inspiration to help them be able to achieve that goal.
Rachel, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.